Test it. Yeah? Can we hear it? Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all. So not a huge week this week, other than we are off to the races. It's pretty exciting times that we are hitting the 445th legislative session. We had a great opening day. It really was incredibly successful. Kind of everyone was shaking the rust off, and for those who are brand new, I think the excitement was sort of palpable in the air. And so it was a really great start. We had some orientation meetings with our new committee chairs. So 2 of the 4 standing committees will have new chairs, great new leaders, Senator Griffith and Senator Feldman, who have, by all accounts, already had a smashing success in their first days on the job. So it's going to be a tough session. It's always with some tough issues that are coming, but we have the right leaders in place to really make a difference. This will be the first of ideally 12 of these Friday gatherings. And so, really do want feedback from members of the press about what would be most effective and helpful. Our plan is to have this sort of regular cadence so that it's we know that this will happen. Also intend to bring other members in on Fridays depending on kind of what the hot issues may be. So if there are thoughts or ideas about what would be most helpful as you all are kind of doing your reporting of Annapolis, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and to reach out to David to make sure that we have the most effective time use for you as well. Let's see. The other thing I did want to mention for folks who have not come down to Annapolis yet, and I think today is the first day you can really see it, is the new State House Dome, which is just remarkably beautiful right now. And the scaffolding has finally come down. I'll tell you, during COVID, when we were walking back and forth to the testing tent, you would look up and you'd see this peeling paint, and we have a national monument here in Annapolis, and I would hope that Marylanders come down and see the investment that we've made. It is beautiful, and today's the first day I think you can really see it. I think it's going to look great for the inauguration next week. We're at the beginning, so there's not really too much moving yet. We're kind of in this hurry up and wait moment because we have, of course, the inauguration of Governor-elect Moore and Lieutenant Governor-elect Aruna Miller next Wednesday. But the probably big news that will be, I think, most important next week is also the introduction of the budget. So while this will largely be the Governor Hogan's budget from his agency heads who have been putting it together throughout the year, of course, through the transition, the Moore team has been working closely with the Hogan folks, and I suspect that they will have a pretty comprehensive or aligned budget that will really represent their priorities. Here are a few things that we're looking for in particular. First and foremost is we are in a very good financial shape today, but we want to make sure that we are prepared for a less financially successful moment in the future in the case that may come, a recession or what have you. And so we want to see at least 10% in the rainy day fund. We want to make sure that we have resources in the case that the economy turns. We'd also like to see a really healthy fund balance, so cash on hand that is being kept to the side for future discussions. This is the first year with question 1, so we have the ability as the legislature to appropriate, which is a new authority granted by the people of Maryland. And we want to do this in a collaborative way with the executive. And so we're hoping that we will see in the fund balance resources that can be shared priorities throughout the session as we have further discussions. We would like to see some set-asides for some major transportation investments across the state, and particularly in the Baltimore region. We know that there's been a lot of conversation about the Red Line and how we can improve east-west transit in the Baltimore region. It's an absolutely essential priority. The governor has mentioned it as a top priority, and we would like to see that reflected in the budget. We also want to see some set-asides for education. We know that the blueprint for Maryland's future is the costs are increasing because of the increased student enrollment in our public schools, and so we want to make sure that we have sufficient funds, not just for this year, but for the out years. This is not just a one-year budget, it is a term budget. It sets the table for the entire 4-year term. We'd like to see all of the legislative, or at least a substantial number of the legislative pre-authorizations in the capital budget. There are a number of projects across the state of Maryland that legislators have indicated in last year's budget that we'd like to see funded. We'd like to make sure that those are largely included in the governor's proposal. We'd also like to see some funds left aside for PAYGO for additional one-time expenditures. We are in a very good place, again, financially, and so one-time expenditures are crucial because they don't have ongoing costs. The last thing I think is really important, and it's not last, but I would say it's important for us to see some level of commitment to, is the funds set aside to convert part-time employees or contractual employees to full-time state workers. We've heard a lot about the vacancy rate in the state of Maryland, and this is a massive challenge. We also need to start hiring people in the state, not relying just on contractors. We've got to find a way to really invest in our public sector employees and rebuild state government. So with those 6,500 vacancies, we have a ways to go. This next week, we're going to be focusing on our main priorities that haven't been outlined in the budget, sort of workforce and apprenticeship. I suspect that the governor will be putting forward some ideas around the service year. We're looking for opportunities to combine that with apprenticeships and looking for new models for workforce development. And then the other major priority we'll see some movement on next week is hopefully around mental health access and moving the ball forward on ensuring that Marylanders have access to the services that will help them to be well physically and mentally. With that, let me pause and see if there are questions.
Mr. President, you used the number of state vacancies, 6,800 on Wednesday. The governor-elect told me that he believes that number is 10,000 and vowed to hire 5,000 new state workers in his first year. First of all, do you believe that 10,000 number is accurate and reflective of the actual number of vacancies? And is it possible to hire 5,000 state employees in a year?
The numbers we have from DLS are around 6,500, and that does not include the university system. So if you include the university system, I think it might be a bit of a, I don't know the exact number for the university system, which may get you to that 10,000 number. Is it possible? Certainly, anything's possible. It means it's going to take a massive commitment. It means that secretaries are going to have to make this a #1 priority, that they wake up in the morning and they're thinking, how do I fill my vacancies? And they go to bed at night thinking, did I fill my vacancies? And so, I hope that's what we see. It's essential for the successful operation of government. It's good to be visionary and bold. 5,000 is a lot, but it's feasible.
Mr. President, how do you do that?
Two distinct questions. First, could you comment on the cabinet secretaries so far and the nominations thereof? And then secondly, what are your top priorities as it pertains to education this year?
Great. So on the nominations, I've been really impressed with the quality and caliber of folks who have been named. I think we're going to be. I think we will do a full vetting to make sure that they are as that they're certainly their background and experience are the best possible, make them the best possible candidates to serve the state of Maryland. We've only gotten kind of the brief introduction, so we have to do our own review to make sure that that everything is as it seems, as I'm sure it will. But it's been a very collaborative process thus far, and I'm pleased to see the pace of those nominations picking up. I think we'll see more in the coming, hopefully in the coming days before the swearing in on the 18th. In terms of education, I think #1 issue is going to have to deal with learning loss from post-pandemic. There's a number of strategies. The blueprint has outlined how we can help students who have fallen behind. So we'll continue to fund and implement with fidelity. I think there are other opportunities, be it through additional one-on-one tutoring or small group tutoring, investments that can be made there for tutoring during the school day. Also, I'll be putting forward a bill that is a statewide grant competition for all schools to participate in to apply to do extended day or extended years and have some pilot demonstration projects of what schools can look like with a different schedule, with an innovative schedule that provides more high-quality time for students and teachers to be together. So, at the end of the day, what matters most is academic achievement. And we know that the pandemic had a hugely negative impact on that, and we have to find a way to catch back up.
I just wanted to follow up on what Brian was talking about. I mean, how do you fill 5,000 vacancies? Are they job incentives on the table now?
It really will depend on the specific agency. I think how you fill correctional roles is going to be different than how you fill DOT role, Department of Transportation roles. And so I think that's really where secretaries are going to have to come up with nuanced plans. Of course, salary is going to be an issue. It's one of the things that we know we're going to have to make state jobs more competitive as compared to local jurisdictions. But it's not just salary. It includes salary, but it is also about inspiring people to rejoin public service. It's about creating the work environment where people feel respected and like professionals, and ensuring that we have flexibility in work days, and so that people can, that young families, that parents have the ability to work for the state and also take care of their kids. I think it's very specific per agency, and that's where I think it's going to take great leaders, leading agencies to come up with the plans and execute on a daily basis.
Mr. President, what kind of conversations are going to have to be had with bargaining units, AFSCME, because clearly they're going to have some thoughts about this because of their contractual obligations with the state.
Certainly. Look, our labor partners have been, clamoring about the vacancy issue for a long time because what they know is that their members are tired, they're exhausted. It's not just the vacancies, it's also those who are who are in those jobs, who are doing double shifts, triple shifts, forced shifts. They're tired and they're doing the best they can, but that's not sustainable in the long haul. And so, our Friends in Organized Labor and AFSCME and a number of other of our public sector unions have been really trying to push to have a better strategy and plan around filling vacancies for a long time. So they will be at the table. I mean, they are important. They have members' voices front and center, and I think it's those who are on the front lines who are doing the work every day that often have the best input for how to create these recruitment and retention plans. And so.
But I think what I mean is incentives and salary bumps for new hires are likely going to unions are going to likely want to see that for their existing members, correct?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, this is part of the bargaining table. I think, these are healthy conversations. It's why collective bargaining is an important value. We bring in the employee groups and we figure out strategies for both the funding of it and the effective implementation of it. So I think there is a real concern, and I think our partners in labor really want to see these vacancies filled. And so everybody is committed to figuring out what a strategy can look like by agency, by division, for how do we fill these vacant positions.
Mr. President, as you talk about filling these positions, some Republicans have said, hey, wait, let's talk about it. Much has been made about how you Democrats now have the second floor, the first floor, supermajority. What role, what say will the loyal opposition have going forward in this?
Sure. Well, look, in the Senate of Maryland, it is a bedrock value that every voice matters. We represent 6.5 million Marylanders. We don't just represent Democratic Marylanders. We don't just represent Republican Marylanders. We represent Marylanders. And so our Republican colleagues, those in the minority party, are just as important voices at the table as those in the majority party. It's the beauty of the Senate. It has always been and will continue to be. There are going to be places where we disagree, and that's okay. That's democracy. But their voices will continue to help us improve our work product and make sure that Marylanders across the state of Maryland, regardless of political affiliation, are represented effectively.
Mr. President, can you offer any more, or can you expand a little bit on the mental health initiatives that you referenced?
Sure. There's really kind of 3 areas of the work that I think are really important. The first is areas of crisis. We know that we've seen, especially with adolescents, are stuck in hospital beds because there are not behavioral health beds available across the state. And so they're in emergency rooms for weeks on end because there's no behavioral health bed that will be able to take them. Again, this is acute for adolescents, but it's also for adults. And so we really have to have the investment in the number of available behavioral health beds and the personnel to be able to staff them, because that's another issue, sort of the nursing and the highly qualified staff to be able to keep the beds open. The second area is availability to services prior to crisis. So, we have this challenge that what we don't want to see is the crisis happen. We want to intervene ahead of time. And so I think there are a number of strategies out there with telehealth, with telemedicine, utilizing community supports in schools, having providers available regularly for young people and adults and seniors who are also, I think, really struggling in this. I mean, the last 2 years have been very challenging for seniors, isolating through the pandemic, and now the world is wide open again. It needs to be easier to get in front of a mental health care professional who can make sure that somebody is well. There's also little things like at primary care visits, just asking the question about somebody's wellness. Have they felt any experienced any sense of depression or anxiety? There are standard of care practices that can be improved upon. And that's about trying to prevent the crisis in the first place. And then last, I would say, is that kind of intermediate zone, because what we know with mental health, it is the same as physical health. It is never permanent. So if somebody is struggling with diabetes, it is a condition that it takes maintenance and hopefully gets better or maintained over time. I think mental health is very similar. And so, it's not we've fixed it. It's a regularly having the stigma washed away and making it more regular and apparent and okay for people to be able to receive services without the concern of both finances and the perception of struggles with mental health.
Mr. President, as the push continues toward electric vehicles, the state budget the transportation budget relies heavily on a gas tax. I don't hear anybody talking about a possible replacement or some kind of adjustment there.
Yeah, look, I think that one of the things that we've talked about this term being, so this is the first year of a 4-year term. I think by the end of this session, you will see an effort to put together a real kind of blue ribbon level transportation approach. I'm looking forward to seeing who the Secretary of Transportation will be, or who will be nominated for that position. It's incredibly, incredibly important. That person, of course, will be overseeing state highways and our MTA, Maryland Transit Administration, our ports, our airport. And I think this is a really important moment over this next year to get the right people around the table, including legislators and experts and business folks, to really think creatively and thoughtfully about the long-term future of our transportation systems in Maryland. That's not just transit, it's not just roads and bridges, it's not just the port, it's all of them, because funding is an issue, but also prioritization of, we will never have sufficient resources to do everything, so we are going to have to prioritize, and I think that's this term, we have to have a strategy in place.
So in terms of the gas tax, though, if you're gonna have less money coming into the gas tax as fewer people are pumping their cars with gas.
Yep.
What do you do? What do you put in place?
The answer is nobody's answered this question yet. This is a national, global issue. I mean, I believe every state, and of course the federal government has a gas tax. It is front and center when we go to national conferences, people are talking about it, but nobody's figured out the next alternative. We're fortunate right now where we've not quite seen that downturn, and we have pretty significant federal resources that can help our transportation investments move forward. Depending on how quickly the conversion to electric vehicles happens, the pace of that revenue challenge could escalate. And so I think that's why I believe now is the right time to at least start evaluating the different options on the table. What makes the most sense? What's the most efficient? What is the most fair? The beauty of a gas tax is it's a user fee. If you use it, you pay it. If you don't, you don't. And so, it's a very, very direct assessment for a system that people benefit from. And so we've got to figure out what are the alternatives that will work the best in a similar fashion. And note that we are in the DMV, right? We have lots of intrastate travel. 95 corridor is one of the most traveled roadways in the world. And so we've got to be mindful that we have competitive impacts of anything that we do with Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. So we have to be really intentional about thinking of it not just as a state of Maryland, but also as a region.
Mr. President, continuing along the gas tax theme, given the price of gas over the last year, we're likely to be looking at the average price of gas in the calculation for gas tax to be fairly high, at least higher than we're used to seeing, plus the inflationary levels that are going to come into play. Does the legislature anticipate doing anything to mitigate another potential large increase of the gasoline tax that would come in July?
So the Budget and Tax Committee just had a briefing by our Moody's Markets, not Moody's Analytics, not the Moody's Market rating, and it was a fascinating conversation, particularly on this topic. I think energy prices over the next 2 years are really in flux, be it because of Ukraine and Russia, because of the shift over with natural gas. In terms of gasoline prices, the projections from Moody's were that over time, over this year, we're going to see oil drop down to $65 a barrel. That's sort of the break-even price for domestic production of oil. If that's the case, that's a substantially lower price per barrel of oil than we've seen in the recent past when we saw it at 100 and 110 and 115. In that case, the inflation index on our gas tax actually will go down because when prices drop. So if we see oil at $65 a barrel, it is more likely that we'll start to see, the high $2 gas, in the high $2.90, $2.95. I think that inflation is hurting everyone. I don't think right now is the moment that we are thinking about a gas tax reprieve in any way or anything along those lines. We'll certainly look for ways to make sure that Marylanders who are suffering from inflation can receive some sort of respite in other areas, but I don't see it as the gas tax. It is so important that we invest in our transportation infrastructure. And it does look promising that over the 2023 that we will see a drop in the price of oil, which therefore will translate at the pump.
You mentioned red line in your opening remarks as an essential priority. The red line, as it was designed years ago, is probably obsolete, right? I mean, you can't do the same one.
Right. So, I think this is a really, really important distinction. And I'm glad you asked the question because I do want to sort of clarify. We need to salvage whatever part of the red line plan we can possibly salvage. We need to keep as much of it on track as we possibly can moving forward because there were significant investments made in alignment and mode and in various parts of the east-west corridor. That corridor for the last 8 years has only gotten worse, not better. And so whatever we can maintain from what was a 12-year project around the red line, we need to. There are going to have to be some changes in certain parts of the alignment just simply because of what's happened over the last 8 years, but we need to revive and maintain as much of the previous red line as is humanly possible so that we don't have to wait another 4 or 5 years of planning and studies. We're going to have to do a ridership analysis. We'll have to do kind of an economic impact review. But whatever we can maintain and keep from the prior project will be in our best interest because we need to move it as fast as possible.
And have you heard from the federal partners in terms of finances?
I know in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was actually, I think it was actually the bipartisan infrastructure bill had Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen inserted, and I believe Congressman Sarbanes as well, inserted an amendment that talked about the ability to revive the red line using these federal dollars. I know that the U.S. Secretary of Transportation has expressed an enormous desire to make an investment in the Baltimore region, be it the red line and including kind of the highway to nowhere. It's clear that the Baltimore region is behind when it comes to transportation options. And so I think there is certainly attention and support from the federal level at the executive branch, and I think when we have a new Secretary of Transportation at the state level, I suspect this will be a day one project that he or she will start to want to move forward.
Got time for one or two more, guys.
You mentioned you'd like to see 10% of the rainy day fund stay there. Would that entail keeping roughly the amount that's already in there? And can you break down also the separate, large pot of surplus funds that are out there right now, and where you would like to see that?
Yeah, so I would say, so we're not quite at 10%. When we close out the budget, and what we'll see in the budget introduction is that there will be every year there is kind of the sweeper effect of any budget that was over budgeted, and some portion of it goes into the rainy day fund. So 10% is double where we have historically been. We traditionally had been, for my first 8 years in office, we were around 5% or 6% at most. 10% is a much healthier set aside in case of an emergency. The other thing is that with inflation, it's a percentage, so it grows substantially. So I think we're over $3 billion at this point in cash surplus, which is a great place to be. So it's in line. It is feasible to do right now. The second part of the question was
the surplus funds and the unspent money there. I mean, we talking about a lot of different priorities, and including the filling the vacant positions. The governor-elect has talked a lot about. So the incentives being pulled from that surplus fund pot. I mean, how can you see that?
Sure. No, that's where I would like to see in the budget outlined set-asides that really put money either in a dedicated purpose account or in some clearly identified, putting aside for future blueprint costs, for future transportation projects, for personnel vacancy reduction, and sort of creating programs that are outlined in the budget. That is separate from what I would hope to see as a cash balance that allows for conversations between the executive and legislative branches during session about how we can best utilize those funds in a shared priority way. So the set-asides are, they're valued by the legislature. That's what we would like to see. I'm hopeful that that's what we'll see from the executive. But it's important to have some level of flex with question one being new this year, that we can have conversations about additional funding.
One more?
I'll give it a shot. Is there a more permanent option, and I forget what you guys called it, so bear with me here. Is there a more permanent option to help pay for the education blueprint plan now that that tax, what was going to happen on the internet, is no longer available?
Well, so it was never anticipated and wasn't budget. It wasn't forecasted into the revenue picture because we knew that there was going to be litigation for the digital ad tax. This is the one that multi-billion-dollar multinational companies pay $0 in taxes to the state of Maryland, while mom and pop shops across the entire state pay their taxes every day. And so, yes, they have fought it in court because multi-billion-dollar corporations don't like paying taxes. And so we anticipated that they would litigate it. They have. We won in the first, in the federal case. The state did not prevail at the trial level in a district court here in Annapolis. I suspect that the Attorney General's office will continue to fight this vociferously because, frankly, I think multinational companies that make over $100 million a year in profit should contribute to the tax to the infrastructure that makes Maryland a great place to live, work, and play. But we'll see how the court plays out. Either way, we are focusing on the projections of the blueprint's costs. We are fully funded through at least 2027. The more challenging times for at least revenue forecasts are in 28 and 29. The more we can start to set aside now and roll over and allow to grow when those years come, the easier it becomes. So right now, we're in a great place. We forecast further out than our Department of Legislative Services normally does, and we are fully funded on current estimates. So we'll see as things move forward what the revenue picture continues to look like.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend.
It was awesome.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so
No
much.
catering?